We will now review some key elements of the quantitative reasoning measure. The quantitative reasoning measure assesses your basic mathematical skills, your understanding of elementary mathematical concepts, and your ability to reason quantitatively and to model and solve problems with quantitative methods. The skills, concepts, and abilities are assessed in the following 4 content areas: arithmetic, algebra, geometry, and data analysis. The content in these areas includes high school mathematics and statistics at a level that is generally no higher than a second course in algebra. It does not include trigonometry, calculus, or other higher-level mathematics. The 5 types of questions you will encounter on the quantitative reasoning measure include quantitative comparison, multiple choice select one, multiple choice select one or more, numeric entry, and data interpretation set questions. This review will walk you through each category of quantitative reasoning questions, including tips for success and samples of each. Let's begin with the quantitative comparison questions. Quantitative comparison questions ask you to compare 2 quantities, quantity A and quantity B, and then determine which of the following statements describes the comparison. Quantity A is greater, quantity B is greater, the 2 quantities are equal, or the relationship cannot be determined from the information given. When answering quantitative comparison questions, the following tips may come in handy. 1. Become familiar with the answer choices. The 4 answer choices will be the same for each quantitative comparison question. Be sure that you understand what each choice means. For example, never select the last answer choice if it is clear that the values of the 2 quantities can be determined by computation. Number 2, avoid unnecessary computations. Don't waste time performing needless computations. Transform or estimate one or both quantities only as much as is necessary. Number 3, remember that geometric figures are not necessarily drawn to scale. Focus on the given information, not the size of the picture. Redraw figures when necessary. Number 4, plug in numbers. If one or both of the quantities are algebraic expressions, you can substitute easy numbers for the variables and compare the resulting quantities. Note that if you see that quantity A is greater than quantity B in one case, and the opposite is true in another case, you should always choose the answer choice. The relationship cannot be determined from the information given. And number 5, simplify the comparison. If both quantities are algebraic or arithmetic expressions, you can simplify them to more easily see their relationship. Let's try a sample question. Follow along as I read the question. Compare quantity A and quantity B using additional information centered above the 2 quantities if such information is given, and select one of the following 4 answer choices. A, quantity A is greater. B, quantity B is greater. C, the 2 quantities are equal. Or D, the relationship cannot be determined from the information given. Note that a symbol that appears more than once in a question has the same meaning throughout the question. Question number 1. Quantity A, the least prime number greater than 24. And quantity B, the greatest prime number less than 28. Now that you have read the question, take a moment to review it. Use the tips we discussed to best determine and/or estimate the relationship between the 2 quantities. Pause the video while you work. When you are ready to review the answer, resume play. The correct answer is choice A. Quantity A is greater. For the integers greater than 24, note that 25, 26, 27, and 28 are not prime numbers, but 29 is a prime number, as are 31 and many other greater integers. Thus, 29 is the least prime number greater than 24, and quantity A is 29. For the integers less than 28, note that 27, 26, 25, and 24 are not prime numbers, but 23 is a prime number, as are 19 and several other lesser integers. Thus, 23 is the greatest prime number less than 28, and quantity B is 23. Let's try another one. Follow along as I read the question. Question number 9. W is greater than 1. Quantity A is equal to 7W minus 4, and quantity B is equal to 2W plus 5. Now that you have read the question, take a moment to review it. Use the tips we discussed to best determine and/or estimate the relationship between the two quantities. Pause the video while you work. When you are ready to review the answer, resume play. The correct answer is choice D. The relationship cannot be determined from the information given. To solve this problem, set up the initial comparison 7W minus 4 is greater than, less than, or equal to 2W plus 5. Then simplify. Step 1. Subtract 2W from both sides and add 4 to both sides to get 5W is greater than, less than, or equal to 9. Step 2. Divide both sides by 5 to get W is greater than, less than, or equal to 9 over 5. The comparison cannot be simplified any further. Although you are given that W is greater than 1, you still don't know how W compares to 9 over 5, or 1.8. For example, if W equals 1.5, then W is less than 1.8. But if W equals 2, then W is greater than 1.8. In other words, the relationship between W and 9 over 5 cannot be determined. Note that each of these simplification steps is reversible, so in reverse order, each simplification step implies that the relationship cannot be determined in the preceding comparison. Thus, the relationship between quantities A and B cannot be determined. The next type of question on the quantitative reasoning measure are the multiple choice select one questions. Multiple choice select one questions are multiple choice questions that ask you to select only one answer choice from a list of 5 choices. When answering these questions, the following tips may come in handy. First, use the fact that the answer is there. If an answer you come up with is not one of the 5 choices given, assume your answer is incorrect and do the following. Reread the question carefully for missed details or misinterpreted information. Check your computations, and reevaluate your solution method. You may have a flaw in your reasoning. Second, examine the answer choices carefully. Depending on the question, you may have to consider each choice separately, or you may have to look for a relationship between them. In some cases, it may be helpful to work backward from the choices, and in some cases, it may be more helpful to simply use your reasoning skills. Third, for questions that require approximations, scan the answer choices to see how close an approximation is needed. It may be helpful to scan the choices briefly before solving the problem to get a better sense of what the question is asking. Some questions will require exact computations, while others may only require estimation. Let's try a sample question. Follow along as I read the question. Question number 2. Which of the following numbers is farthest from the number 1 on the number line? Is it A, -10, B, -5, C, 0, D, 5, or E, 10? Now that you have read the question, take a moment to review it. Use the tips we discussed to determine the correct answer. Pause the video while you work. When you are ready to review the answer, resume play. The correct answer is choice A, -10. Circling each of the answer choices in a sketch of the number line, as shown in Figure 4, shows that of the given numbers, -10 is the greatest distance from 1. Another way to answer the question is to remember that the distance between two numbers on the number line is equal to the absolute value of the difference of the two numbers. For example, the distance between -10 and 1 is the absolute value of -10 minus 1, which equals 11, and the distance between 10 and 1 is the absolute value of 10 minus 1, which equals the absolute value of 9, which equals 9. Let's try another one. Follow along as I read the question. Question number 4. A car got 33 miles per gallon using gasoline that cost $2.95 per gallon. Approximately what was the cost in dollars of the gasoline used in driving the car 350 miles? Is it A, $10, B, $20, C, $30, D, $40, or E, $50? Now that you have read the question, take a moment to review it. Use the tips we discussed to determine the correct answer. Pause the video while you work. When you are ready to review the answer, resume play. The correct answer is choice A, $30. Scanning the answer choices indicates that you can do at least some estimation and still answer confidently. The car used 350 over 33 gallons of gasoline, so the cost was 350 over 33 times $2.95. You can estimate the product of 350 over 33, all multiplied by 2.95, by estimating 350 over 33 a little low, 10, and estimating 295 a little high, 3, to get approximately 10 times 3 equals $30. You can also use the calculator to compute a more exact answer and then round the answer to the nearest $10, as suggested by the answer choices. The calculator yields the decimal 31.287, which rounds to $30. The next type of question on the quantitative reasoning measure are the multiple choice, select one or more questions. Multiple choice, select one or more questions are multiple choice questions that ask you to select one or more answer choices from a list of choices. A question may or may not specify the number of choices to select. It is important to note that no credit will be given unless you select all of the correct choices and no others. When answering these questions, the following tips may come in handy. First, note whether you are asked to indicate a specific number of answer choices or all choices that apply. In the latter case, be sure to consider all of the choices, determine which ones are correct, and select all of those and only those choices. Note that there may be only one correct choice. Second, understand that in some questions that involve conditions that limit the possible values of the numerical answer choices, it may be efficient to determine the least and/or the greatest possible value. Knowing the least and/or greatest possible value may enable you to quickly determine all of the choices that are correct. Third, avoid lengthy calculations by recognizing and continuing numerical patterns. Let's try a sample question. Follow along as I read the question. Question number 2. Which of the following integers are multiples of both 2 and 3? Indicate all such integers. A, 8, B, 9, C, 12, D, 18, E, 21, and F, 36. Now that you have read the question, take a moment to review it. Use the tips we discussed to determine the correct answer or answers. Pause the video while you work. When you are ready to review the answer or answers, resume play. The correct answer choices are choices C, 12, D, 18, and F, 36. You can first identify the multiples of 2, which are 8, 12, 18, and 36, and then among the multiples of 2, identify the multiples of 3, which are 12, 18, and 36. Alternatively, if you realize that every number that is a multiple of 2 and 3 is also a multiple of 6, you can identify the choices that are multiples of 6. The next type of question on the quantitative reasoning measure are the numeric entry questions. Numeric entry questions ask you either to enter your answer as an integer or a decimal in a single answer box, or to enter it as a fraction in 2 separate boxes, one for the numerator, and one for the denominator. When answering these questions, the following tips may come in handy. 1. Make sure you answer the question that is asked. Since there are no answer choices to guide you, read the question carefully and make sure you provide the type of answer required. Sometimes there will be labels before or after the answer box to indicate the appropriate type of answer. Pay special attention to units, such as feet or miles, to orders of magnitude, such as millions or billions, and to percents as compared with decimals. 2. If you are asked to round your answer, make sure you round to the required degree of accuracy. For example, if an answer of 46.7 is to be rounded to the nearest integer, you need to enter the number 47. If your solution strategy involves intermediate computations, you should carry out all computations exactly and round only your final answer in order to get the required degree of accuracy. If no rounding instructions are given, enter the exact answer. And 3. Examine your answer to see if it is reasonable with respect to the information given. You may want to use estimation or another solution path to double-check your answer. Let's try a sample question. Follow along as I read the question. Question number 1. One pen costs 25 cents and one marker costs 35 cents. At those prices, what is the total cost of 18 pens and 100 markers? Note that the answer is to be entered in dollars. Now that you have read the question, take a moment to review it. Use the tips we discussed to determine the correct numerical answer. Pause the video while you work. When you are ready to review the answer, resume play. The correct answer is $39.50, or an equivalent decimal. Multiplying 25 cents by 18 yields $4.50, which is the cost of the 18 pens, and multiplying 35 cents by 100 yields $35, which is the cost of the 100 markers. The total cost is therefore $4.50 plus 35, which equals $39.50. Equivalent decimals, such as 39.5 or 39.500, are also considered correct. Note that the dollar symbol is in front of the answer box, so the symbol does not need to be entered in the box. In fact, only numbers, a decimal point, and a negative sign can be entered in the answer box. Let's try another one. Follow along as I read the question. Question number 2. Rectangle R has length 30 and width 10, and square S has length 5. The perimeter of S is what fraction of the perimeter of R? Note that the answer is to be entered into two boxes, the top for the numerator and the bottom for the denominator of the fraction. Now that you have read the question, take a moment to review it. Use the tips we discussed to determine the correct numerical answer. Pause the video while you work. When you are ready to review the answer, resume play. The correct answer is 20 over 80, or any equivalent fraction. The perimeter of R is 30 plus 10 plus 30 plus 10, which equals 80. And the perimeter of S is 4 times 5, which equals 20. Therefore, the perimeter of S is 20 over 80 of the perimeter of R. To enter the answer, 20 over 80, you should enter the numerator 20 in the top box and the denominator 80 in the bottom box. Because the fraction does not need to be reduced to lowest terms, any fraction that is equivalent to 20 over 80 is also considered correct, as long as it fits in the boxes. For example, both of the fractions 2 over 8 and 1 over 4 are considered correct. The next type of question on the quantitative reasoning measure are the data interpretation sets. Data interpretation questions are grouped together and refer to the same table, graph, or other data presentation. These questions ask you to interpret or analyze the given data. The types of questions may be multiple choice, both types, or numeric entry. When answering these questions, the following tips may come in handy. 1. Scan the data presentation briefly to see what it is about, but do not spend time studying all of the information in detail. Focus on those aspects of the data that are necessary to answer the questions. Pay special attention to the axes and scales of graphs, to the units of measurement or orders of magnitude, such as billions, that are given in the titles, labels, and legends, and to any notes that clarify the data. 2. Bar graphs and circle graphs, as well as other graphical displays of data, are drawn to scale, so you can read or estimate data visually from such graphs. For example, you can use the relative sizes of bars or sectors to compare the quantities that they represent, but be aware of broken scales and of bars that do not start at 0. And 3, the questions are to be answered only on the basis of the data presented, everyday facts, such as the number of days in a year, and your knowledge of mathematics. Do not make use of specialized information you may recall from other sources about the particular context on which the questions are based, unless the information can be derived from the data presented. Let's try a sample question. Follow along as I read the question. Question number 1. Given the data presented in Figure 8, if the dollar amount of sales at store P was $800,000 for 2006, what was the dollar amount of sales at that store for 2008? Is it A, $727,200, B, $792,000, C, $800,000, D, $880,000, or E, $968,000? Now that you have read the question, take a moment to review the data set in Figure 8. Use the tips we discussed to determine the correct answer choice for the given question. Pause the video while you work. When you are ready to review the answer, resume play. The correct answer is choice B, $792,000. According to Figure 8, if the dollar amount of sales at store P was $800,000 for 2006, then it was 10% greater for 2007, which is 110% of that amount, or $880,000. For 2008, the amount was 90% of $880,000, which is $792,000. Note that an increase of 10% for one year and a decrease of 10% for the following year does not result in the same dollar amount as the original dollar amount, because the base that is used in computing the percents is $800,000 for the first change, but $880,000 for the second change. Let's try another one. Pause the video while you review the data in Figure 8. When you are finished reviewing, resume play. Follow along as I read the question. Question number 2. At store T, the dollar amount of sales for 2007 was what percent of the dollar amount of sales for 2008? Give your answer to the nearest 0.1%. Now that you have read the question, take a moment to review the data set. Use the tips we discussed to determine the correct numerical answer. Pause the video while you work. When you are ready to review the answer, resume play. The correct answer is 108.7%. If A is the dollar amount of sales at store T for 2007, then 8% of A, or 0.08 times A, is the amount of decrease from 2007 to 2008. Thus, A minus 0.08 times A equals 0.92 times A is the dollar amount for 2008. Therefore, the desired percent can be obtained by dividing A by 0.92 times A, which equals A over 0.92 times A, which also equals 1 over 0.92, or 1.0869565. Expressed as a percent and rounded to the nearest 0.1%, this number is 108.7%. You have now completed the key elements review of the quantitative reasoning measure. Keep up the great work!